Hello, everybody, and welcome to Commodity Culture, where we break down the commodity space for both new and experienced investors. My name is Jesse Day. Before we get started, standard disclaimer: nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. And today I'm joined by Rick Mazur, CEO, and Dr. Rebecca Hunter, VP of Exploration at Forum Energy Metals, a company focused on the discovery of high-grade uranium deposits in the Athabasca Basin, Saskatchewan, and the Thelon Basin. It's an honor to have you both on the show again.
Thanks, Jesse. Thanks for having us back.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Jesse.
Yes, excited to dive into uranium and Forum Energy Metals. And let's start with an update on the uranium sector in general. And I'll turn to you for this one, Rick, because we've seen the spot price rising steadily to a point where it's just hit a 15-year high, and sentiment seems very strong. What is your view on the current health of the uranium sector?
Well, Jesse, your doctor would say if you don't change your eating habits and you don't get enough exercise, your blood pressure is going to continue to rise and your cholesterol is going to continue to rise. And that's exactly what's happening in this market. The demand is up. Supply disruptions are happening around the world. No new supplies coming on stream because there's no price incentive, and that's why the prices are ratcheting up. And you know, this market, it needs a big change, and it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I had Rick Rule on the show recently, and we talked about uranium. He said we're in a bull market that has at least a year left to run. I found that to be a little bit on the conservative side because it looks potentially to be much longer to me with the setup we have here. What are your thoughts there? Is there more than a year left to go in this uranium bull run?
Yeah, well, first of all, Rick has been a student of uranium for a long time, and I've been following him and know him reasonably well. And it was a talk that he gave at VRIC in Vancouver in 2003 that really sparked me to start Forum as a uranium explorer in 2004 because he certainly alerted me to the uranium market was rising again. And as a young geologist in the 70s, exploring for uranium for some 10 years, I jumped on his words. So um, you know, uh, he he's been out there talking about the bull market. He picked it a couple of months ago, uh, based on the Japanese restarts, and I think he's correct there. But in my view, there's a lot more coming on stream down the road that's going to continue for the medium term for a good bull market here.
Yeah, and so do you think this time we'll have a different situation than the last bull run pre-Fukushima when we saw a parabolic hockey stick spike in the uranium price and then, of course, a dramatic collapse after the Fukushima event occurred? Do you think we might be seeing kind of a more steady, longer, drawn out appreciation in the uranium price and related equities this time around?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the whole sector needs an overhaul. The first thing that's obviously affecting it is the geopolitics. It certainly raised a lot of concerns by the utilities, by the fuel buyers, um, about security of supply. 55% of the world's uranium comes from Russia and Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. Um, Geopolitically hot area. Niger produces 5% of uranium. Only 15% of uranium comes from Canada. So we certainly need a Canadian source of supply. Um, I think the most interesting thing that's happened recently is we know that 1/3 of highly enriched uranium comes from Russia, and that's what needs to go into a nuclear reactor. Well, Orano, the state-owned nuclear Energy Corporation just announced that they're going to invest 1.7 billion euros in increasing their enrichment capacity because they need to supply that to their customers. So we need uranium production here in the West. We need uranium conversion in the West, and we need uranium enrichment in the West.
Yeah, great point about the geopolitical factors coming into play right now. There does seem to be a bifurcation of supply. Kazakhstan, obviously, working closely with Russia on the uranium mining front. They also have agreements in place with China. So it remains to be seen how much of the Kazakh supply will actually even be able to make it to the West. So that will definitely contribute to supply disruption. So I'm wondering what you're seeing from inside the industry in terms of fuel buyers and their attitudes towards securing uranium before the price rises further. Is there a sense of urgency at this point, or are they not really so focused on the price?
Well, we're explorers. It's not like I deal with fuel buyers, but I watch the market, and I would say there's obviously an absolute sense of urgency. Since the World Nuclear Association meetings, and one of our directors attended that, there certainly was a sense of urgency that came out of that meeting, and we saw that. We saw the prices of uranium, spot prices, going from $60 to $74. So that to me is a sense of urgency. The term market has really picked up in 2023, as you know, and the Nuclear Energy Institute is meeting as we speak in the United States, and I expect that we're going to see from the U.S. Fuel buyers continued sense of urgency.
Yeah, some very good points. Recently, Tim Gitzel, the CEO of Cameco, called the current demand outlook for uranium the best he's ever seen in his career. Would you agree with that assessment? And how do you currently see the demand outlook and potential supply deficits up ahead?
Well, listen, I don't have the same sort of information that Tim has on the markets, so he definitely knows the markets. If he's saying that, I believe it, and I would tend to agree with it. I mean, I thought the market from 2004 to 2011 was a really good market, but I think the difference this go around is the fact that the world wants clean, carbon-free energy. I think nuclear energy is gaining great acceptance around the world to meet those goals. And on top of that, small modular reactor developments are really starting to happen now, which is going to put more pressure on the demand for uranium. And that's a different topic altogether.
So let's now pivot to Forum Energy Metals, and I'll turn to you for this, Rebecca. If you could kick things off with the assay results from your 2023 summer drill program at the Thelon Basin. Please walk us through the results and what they mean for the company moving forward.
Okay, yeah. So I just put this map up here just quickly just to show you where we are. So we got into the Thelon Basin this summer to do just a short 1,000-meter drill program, and so we focused that at Tadagak to start. So that's where I'll talk around there, just for location wise. Unconformity deposit, so that's what we're looking for. That's just kind of just a cartoon to kind of show you kind of what we're looking for there, so you know. And I'm going to talk about gravity anomalies, and so we basically, the area that we look at is kind of a larger gravity anomaly, and that's because you get clay around these deposits. And so that's just kind of just background. So when I show this next slide. So here's the Tadagak area, the project area. So we wanted to get in there this summer and just get some actual results for Forum. So, we can talk all we want about kind of historical results, but we want to get in there and actually show what we have that is tangible. And so we drilled 4 holes. And so that's where we got some really great grades. We went back into an area that was drilled historically to just kind of drill it at a better, more optimal angle than that was done historically. And that's where we got the 2.25 over 11 meters. So really good grades, that you can see, typically in the Athabasca. And then on top of that, with the 2 other holes that we did, we wanted to step out and show the continuity of that mineralization. And so basically went 200 meters, a fairly aggressive step out, to show that we have the mineralization in these kind of steep lenses, which I'll show in another slide, over basically a 250 meter width now. So we intersected 0.4 over 12 at 200 meters, and at 150 meters away from that initial hole, we hit 1% over 6.2. And so just to show, I guess, a really quick cross-section of that, so a northwest to southeast kind of cross-section, what we've determined is that the mineralization is currently 50 meters wide. It's a series of lenses that are steeply dipping, so very similar kind of style if you're familiar with NextGen's Arrow or Cameco's Eagle Point deposits. So these are structurally hosted, they're in these steep lenses, and there's several of them. So the one hole that we did that had the really nice grades, 2.25, that only tagged into 2 of these lenses. So the actual mineralized zone is actually, wider than that. It's about 50 meters wide. And I guess the real upside here that we're excited about is that based on the holes that we've done and the historical holes, we could potentially make that even wider. So we don't really know what's on either side of these, to the northwest and the southeast. We don't know what's at depth, because a lot of this stuff too, just to also clarify, all this stuff is very shallow. So it's all under 200 meters. That's actually all under 180 meters. And so a lot of these holes haven't drilled deeper than 250. So, potential to chase these structures at depth. And then the big upside, of course, is chasing this along basically trend. And so we know we have mineralization over 250 meters. And so the exciting part is that we know that we have mineralization here. We have a very fertile trend, which we've called the Tadagac Fault, and that we can chase that along trend for over 1.2 kilometers. And then we also have a lot of these, we have subparallel faults within this broader anomaly. This is kind of a gravity anomaly. It's a clay altered zone. And we can chase that along these subparallel faults. So it's kind of almost like a gold system in a fault system. So a lot of upside potential there. And that's kind of the bulk of what we did at Tadagac this summer.
Could we take a step back and maybe have you touch on unconformity related deposits and what that means? I recommend everybody check out the last interview I did with both of you. I'll put a link in the description below, because both of you discussed all the different types of uranium deposits, and I think it's invaluable information for investors. But for those who didn't tune into that yet, maybe you could just give us a kind of a primer on unconformity deposits.
Yeah, that for sure. So unconformity deposits are just one of many different types of uranium deposits. And so I think there's 15 in total. And so in unconformity ones, the setting that these are formed in is essentially you have a basin. And so if you're familiar with the Athabasca Basin, that's one of them, the Thelon Basin. You have this sandstone unit. It's undeformed sandstone. And then it overlies an older basement rock assemblage. And so that's what's underneath here. All these different rocks. You have granitic ones, palitic, just as basically shales, like cooked up mudstones essentially. And so these deposits form in kind of 2 locations. They form, but where it gets its name from is a lot of these form at that contact, which is what we call the unconformity, is a contact between that sandstone that's undeformed and then these older rocks that are underneath. And they usually also occur at fault zones, big fault zones, and then they have these clay alteration envelopes kind of over top of them. And so the mineralization is largely at that contact, but then you can also get them down in the rocks underneath as well. And so those are called basement hosted. So when we say basement hosted unconformity, that's kind of where they're situated down in faults under that contact. And then you have the ones that are actually at the unconformity, and that's the unconformity contact ones. So that's kind of in a nutshell, kind of what these deposits are all about.
And they're the richest deposits in the world. Grades are better than 1%, up to 20%. Rebecca can maybe expound more on that in comparison to other uranium deposits.
Yeah, that's why they're so sought after, and that's why we're looking for those exclusively, because yes, like Rick said, the grades are substantial. So the average, so all the different uranium deposits in the world and types, the average grade I think is 0.05 or something. It's quite low. And so unconformity deposits kind of range from 0.5 to 20%. And those are mining grades. So, you can intersect in drill holes, 80%, 90% uranium. So that's how rich they are. They're fairly small in footprint though, but they're very densely mineralized. And that's why they're very sought after.
So in today's prices, Jesse, a 2% uranium deposit would be equal to a 1 ounce gold deposit. So think about that. We've just intersected in one of our holes better than 1 ounce of gold over 11 meters. So for your audience there that can equate things to the gold market, that's what we're dealing with here.
Well, let's move on now to the Ned Anomaly, one of over 20 targets for high-grade unconformity deposits on the Thelon Basin project. Talk to us about the geochemical results from Ned, and also if you could explain how geochemical results differ from drill results and what it all means.
For sure. So again, I'll just show this slide just to orient people where we are. And so I guess one other thing to comment too with our property is that the yellow here is where the Thelon Basin sits. And so our property is about a third covered by the Thelon sandstone, and the rest, the sandstone has been eroded away. So everything in white here, those are basement hosted targets. So kind of like I was saying in that last slide. And then where all these dots are in the yellow, so those are areas where actually we're looking for those unconformity contact ones. And the importance too there is those unconformity contact ones, those are the ones that are very high grade. So those are the ones that, MacArthur, Cigar, Arrow, Arrow is actually a basement hosted one, but Cigar and MacArthur in particular, you have those really high grades, like up to 20%. Anyways, I'll get into Ned now. So Ned here is in the sandstone. It's along this major fault zone. It's up here on our property. And so we wanted to get there because, again, it had really good gravity anomaly. So again, it has an area that we suspect has a big alteration halo. So that's, kind of what we're looking for those unconformity contact targets. But unfortunately we lost the hole really early on. So we had just a short program. We didn't get to depth. So the target depth was more at 165, 300. We only got to 165. And so but we did get some good alteration. And so this is kind of what we ended up with. Here's just a picture of the drill core. So you get these kind of white zones. That's what we call bleaching. That's something that is observed above all types of unconformity uranium deposits. So it's something you look for, as well as this kind of fracturing, this broken up rock. Those are fault zones. And so that's another thing. And so we looked at the geochemistry, and what we got was, up to 2.6 ppm uranium, and then elevated boron, silver, nickel, and moly. And so we look at geochemistry because it helps us kind of hone in. It's kind of like doing detective work. If you have really elevated uranium, well, you're there. You can't really hone in. Now you can kind of follow the deposit. But when you have just low uranium, and then you have these what we call pathfinder elements, they're kind of clues that help you hone in to where these deposits could be and kind of help you kind of narrow down where the deposits are. And so that's why we use geochemistry, and we use these certain elements because these elements are associated with uranium mineralization. And so I just want to hone in to this 2.6. Most investors will look at that and I mean, yeah, that's not very high. But it is high compared to average sandstone. And so sandstone is typically made of quartz, and so there's no uranium in that. And so, you got usually around 0.2 ppm. So when we're using really subtle clues to get us into these areas, 2.6 is actually very interesting. And so it's very perspective that we have the geochemical results here that they're showing. And so we know that the area is fertile for uranium processes, and now it's just a question now of getting actually drilling to depth and kind of narrowing down where, potentially there's something exciting at this anomaly.
So talk to us about what makes the Thelon Basin unique when it comes to uranium geology, and give us your thoughts on the possibility of uranium production in Nunavut.
I mean, I guess this is a slide just to show kind of the proposition of what we're going for here. One of the things that makes the Thelon Basin unique in general is that there's not a lot of these types of sandstone basins that make these high-grade unconformity deposits in the world. So there's the Athabasca Basin, by far, of course, is extremely endowed in unconformity deposits. There's another basin in Australia that's also endowed and has some very high tonnage deposits as well. That's the MacArthur Basin in the Northern Territory of Australia. And then the Thelon Basin. And so they're just not, they're not everywhere in the world. And so having the Thelon Basin is very important. And it's the same size as the Athabasca. It has the same geology. It's not even very far away from the Athabasca Basin. It's only 700 kilometers north of the Athabasca Basin. But it's just underexplored. And that's kind of what this slide is kind of showing, that the Thelon Basin, why it's exciting is that it's like looking back in time to the Athabasca Basin was in 1978, when there was only a few deposits found, and they were all kind of these deposits mostly that were on the periphery of the basin, similar to what's been found in the Thelon, which is the deposits that are the zones like Tadagak, like we have, but also Kigavik. Orano has 133 million pounds up there. And so you're kind of looking back at time, and now if fast forward to now, we're kind of at a cusp where we can actually find more. And, the super giants, those really high 20% grade deposits, they weren't found until the 80s. And that was because you actually had more time exploring the district, but also by that time they had a very much a working understanding of that unconformity model. And so they actually could step out and test more optimal targets. And that's what they did. And that's where, all these other much larger deposits were found. And so I think we're at a cusp too. In the Thelon Basin, we've had the time, we have the knowledge, and now I think we can step into the sandstone and actually sleuth out one of these actual big deposits. And then you asked about the production. So, I mean, if Fukushima never happened, I think there would already be a production center in the Thelon Basin. So Orano at that time, it was Areva then, they were progressing through and had all the boxes checked to make that happen back in 2012 and onward to 2015. But by that time, the uranium price just didn't cooperate, and so they had to step back. So I think this area very much could be a mine. There's already mining in the territory, so we know it's possible, it's economic. And so I think it's just having the uranium price cooperate, kind of a change in that political view. There's no reason why the Thelon can't be a very important jurisdiction for uranium.
Well, a lot of very exciting news on the company there. What I'd like to know is, you've spoken about what your future plans are, but maybe you could give us some more details, any upcoming catalysts or news flow that investors should be paying attention to.
I think we also did a bit of geophysics this summer, so I think that'll be coming out in the next few months. We still have to go through the data, so we did some passive seismic, so keep an eye out for that, because that's going to really help us with targeting. So at Tadagak in particular, and some of these other anomalies like Ned, and Bjorn is another high priority target. And then we have the rest of our Athabasca portfolio as well. So we have some partner operated projects that are ongoing. We're hoping that the High Rock project will have some drilling this winter, and so has a really good, trend south of Key Lake. So a very prospective uranium trend. So we're hoping that you get some good results there. And so that's kind of what we'll be looking for news for the near term, and then we'll start drilling. The plan is to start drilling the Thelon in June, and so that's when we'll be able to progress Tadagak and the property up there.
Great. Well, thank you so much to both of you for joining us on the show again. Before I do let you go, do either of you have any final words on the company or the uranium market in general? Rick, I'll go to you first on this one.
This is a major discovery. Doesn't matter what type of commodity, gold, copper, uranium. This is a major uranium discovery, and it astounds me that our market valuation is what it is today. And someone's gone, recognizes that this is a major discovery, and someone's gone and staked all around us recently. So compare the results that we're getting and the portfolio of assets that we have in the Athabasca Basin, and compare that to our peer companies in the Athabasca and in the uranium space around the world. And I'm sure you'll agree that we're a screaming buy.
And Rebecca, any final words on the company?
Yeah, I think just to build on that, one of the aspects is that, after downturns, when you usually get back into districts, you lose a lot of knowledge. So it's been 10 years since the Thelon has been explored. And typically when that happens, you lose a lot of knowledge. And I think the real, what Forum really has is that we're not losing any of that knowledge. We're basically starting, the Thelon exploration where it was left off over 10 years ago. And so I think for investors, your money is going straight into discovery, not only just expanding Tadagak and Kavik, the zones that we have and we can expand upon, but hopefully, something even bigger in the future, because we have that knowledge to just get to testing it right away.
Jesse, and the reason we have that knowledge is Rebecca here was we haven't mentioned her background. She was the project manager for Cameco from 2005 to 2012, made all these discoveries for Cameco, but of course they let the ground lapse. I staked it, and Rebecca's come on board as VP of Exploration of our company to pick up where she left off, to make that discovery, and it's going to be for Forum, not for Cameco.
Great. Well, thanks once again to both of you for joining me again. Definitely looking forward to keeping up to date on the company, and it's been a fun conversation.
Thanks, Jesse.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.